Psst, psst. Hi! Due to the way YouTube works, I want to make a quick announcement before this video. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button or leaving a small comment. It really helps. If you feel like helping even more, you can check my Patreon or Ko-fi accounts. All the links are in the description box. Thank you! Greetings! In today's video, I'm trying something a bit different. As you can see from the setup, I have the first page of Daniel Smith's 238 color chart, and I have a sheet all prepared to swatch the colors, and I'm gonna try to record live me swatching the colors. It's a bit difficult because I don't usually record the audio at the same time that I record the video because of many reasons. Like the cats, like living in this building that has a lot of noises from the other tenants as well. So I don't know how this will work, but I wanted to try because I couldn't see myself recording a complete voiceover for such a lengthy video. If you've watched my Saturday live streams, you're basically already used to the noises around here, so like the squeaky chair and the cats and squeaky chair, and yeah, so I just wanted to give this a try and see if it can work. So yeah, I'm gonna be swatching these colors. This is what the 61st colors. I made the corresponding paper to swatch them. On the paper I just wrote the color's name and the number of the color in the range, and I made a black bar at the top with the Sharpie to test the opacity. I was considering writing the pigments on this sheet as well because it's really useful, but I think this could be a fairly older version of their color chart. I do suspect that some colors are missing, or that some have changed formula since this chart was made. So I didn't want to write down colors and make a mistake because I can't really erase. So that's where I stand at the moment with this. Maybe later I will come back in and add the color pigment for the colors that I deem it necessary, but for now I just want to have this visual reference of all the colors, so when I'm looking for something specific in terms of granulation or hue, I can refer to these sheets and see what Daniel Smith has to offer. The interest for me in having access to these colors by Daniel Smith is that it's a brand I can easily buy around here, so knowing what they have to offer can be really handy. This paper is basic cellulose paper, so it's nothing special. This is the regular brush you've seen me use a lot. It's the Royal and Langnickel Zen. I think it's supposed to be like a fake squirrel or something, but it's the one I use whenever I swatch colors, so it's been around for ever since the beginning. And it's still pretty nice, and it's very cheap and affordable, so yeah. Good brush, easy to find. I have my water bucket here, and yeah, hopefully this is gonna work fine. So let's start. And the first color on the chart is Buff Titanium. If you've seen more than one dot chart, you might have noticed that Daniel Smith's dot chart is really special in that the dots are really uneven and weird in a way. Like they really look like they took out a tube and went boop, 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 boop. If you see the Schminke one, the colors are like, the dots are perfect little round dots. Really nicely made, really tight, and almost all the same size. So it's kind of funny to compare. This is just a very old rag so that I can rinse my brush. The next color is Hansa Yellow Medium. I'm realizing that they probably intended this to go from top to bottom and top to bottom and top to bottom, but it's kind of a weird way to go about this in my opinion. I might try to I will try to follow their logic. So the next color won't be Hansa Yellow Medium, but Langnickel Detonate Yellow. I could have just swatched the colors on these sheets. I'm aware of that, but I kind of like having the experience of this as well, because I think it can show perhaps a bit better the granulation, and then you can store away these sheets so you don't end up having dots of paints everywhere if the weather gets too humid, which can happen here during the summer. The next color is Bismuth Vanadate Yellow. I also didn't copy the opacity information and the granulating information in the hopes that it's going to show well enough on the swatches, so I don't really have to write them down. I'm always going to keep this sheet nearby anyway, so if I have any question, I can always take it out and refer to it for this information. This yellow is really, really bright. The next color is Hansa Yellow Light. The Hansa colors, the light, medium, and deep, are really useful colors. They are labeled as being semi-transparent, but I don't think there's a lot of transparent yellows, so I'll take semi-transparent. It's gonna be fine. I'm sorry that I don't have the pigments with me, so I cannot really comment on that, but yeah. Good thing about these Hansa colors is that they are series 1 for all of them. Yeah, so they are the least expensive if you compare with this one, this color, which is Azo Yellow, which is a really nice color, but it's a series 3, so you will pay a lot more for this color, than you would for a Hansa color. But it's a super nice yellow. It is semi-transparent as well. This is my very first time recording the audio separate, but at the same time as the video, so there might be a couple of adjustments, like maybe I shouldn't rinse my brush so vigorously, because it kind of makes some noise that I did not really consider before. Just gonna make room to move this up. Okay. Next color is Cadmium Yellow Light Hue. I do believe that Daniel Smith doesn't have any real cadmiums. I will see throughout this swatching process, but I think they made a point of having only cadmium hues. They do have cobalts, so I am not necessarily sure about the logic behind all of this. Perhaps cobalts are less bad from the toxicity and environment side of things. They really make a point, I think they say so on their website as well, that they have a certain pride in having no real cadmiums in their collection, but instead they offer hues that they will say replace really well the original cadmium's colors. Okay, so next color is still a cadmium. This one is Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue. I don't use cadmiums a lot, not because they are bad colors, especially since these are hues. I mean, I could easily use them instead of the real thing. They leave you with perhaps a cleaner conscience, but the reason I don't use cadmiums a lot is because they are in the pricier range. They are series 3, so they will cost you a lot more than the Hansa colors, which do the job really well. The next color is Aureolin, also called Cobalt Yellow. According to this sheet, it is transparent. I think this color is the original Aureolin, perhaps this one. The main issue with it, why it's not super common, is that it will change color a lot. It is not a perfectly light, fast color. I don't remember if it goes lighter or darker or like greener, but there is something that happens with this color over time, and that makes it a little less desirable than some of the more modern colors. Alright, next color is Lemon Yellow. This one is also fairly common, at least in name. I do believe that perhaps some companies will use the same name, but maybe a different pigment. It's fairly common though, so accordingly it's a series 1 color. It makes for a nice neutral yellow if you just want to start with a simple primary triad of yellow, magenta, and cyan. The next color and the last one in this column is Cadmium Yellow Deep Hue. So this is a super nice warm yellow. Almost orange, actually. Pico has a lot of opinions about cadmium colors. Right, so that's our first column, consisting mostly of yellows. I will go back up to fill in with the Hansa Yellow Medium. It is close to lunchtime for the cats, so you might hear a lot of Pico in the background. Well, I think there has been some contamination on my sheet. This looks like a bit of another color, perhaps this Cadmium Orange Hue. I'm gonna try to not pick it up. Next color is Maen Yellow. Daniel Smith offers a good selection of Maen colors. I am not fully knowledgeable about the making of these colors, but I think they are all inspired by the process and the colors that the ancient Mayan people would use to color their art and sculpture. It is supposed to be a transparent color. There's a real difficulty with Daniel Smith's dot charts, because some dots will be fairly generous and some dots will be fairly weak. Just as an example, I might have a harder time making a good swatch of the Pyro Crimsons since it's so small. But if you look at the Imperial Purple of the Quinacridone Fuchsia, these colors are more generous. So they probably just intend us to swatch the colors on this sheet that they sell, because it is watercolor paper. So to just do like this and not transfer the color to another sheet. But I wanted to see if I could find a use for this. If having all the colors on one sheet of paper will be helpful for me. Okay, and next color is Naples Yellow. It does look fairly reddish if I think on all the other Naples Yellow I've seen, which would usually be very, very yellow. This one is kind of a light peach color. It is supposed to be semi-transparent, but since the dot doesn't pick up super well, it's kind of hard to see. The next color is Indian Yellow, another one of their transparent yellow. This is a very nice color. It's fairly intense, so it could be a bit hard to use it as is, without mixing it or diluting it. But I really appreciate this color because it is so transparent and it is very bright. Then we have Hansa Yellow Deep, which I do believe is the last of the Hansa colors. I am checking to see if I had any granulating colors so far, because I'm thinking that perhaps the way I swatch these colors doesn't allow to show the granulation a lot, but most yellows are not granulating. The only two colors I've had with granulation so far are the Buff Titanium and the Nickel Detonate Yellow. This one is really, really pale, so it's hard to see the granulation, but I think it registers fine on the Buff Titanium. Okay, back to the yellows. The next color is New Gamboge. This is one of the colors that I know has changed formulas in the last years, so I am not sure which formula is on my dot card, so it's kind of tricky for me to get the proper feel for this color. It used to be made as a single pigment, but I think that has changed ever since. It used to be PY 153, but now I think it is a combination of two colors. It is a lovely color. I'm a bit bummed if this is the single pigment version that they stopped making it, because it is super nice. And it's always a bother when they stop making something super nice and they make something different, and then you don't really know if it's still as good as the version you had before, and you have to make do with what is available. So next color is Enderlin Yellow, also a semi-transparent color. I can see what they put these in the yellow section, even if they do look a bit more orange. If I had the pigment information on this sheet, I could see if it's made from a yellow pigment, because that's what happens sometimes. A yellow is made an orange looking color is made from a yellow pigment, so it's easier to sort it with the yellows than it is to sort it with the orange. And sometimes you have an orange pigment that almost looks red, like transparent Pyro Orange. Okay, next color is Permanent Yellow Deep. This one is supposed to be transparent. I am a bit, I don't have a very strong opinion on transparent versus opaque colors. Sometimes it's fairly unclear what they mean by that. Sometimes it's really clear what they mean by that. Some colors are definitely opaque. If you take, for example, chromium oxide green or the buff titanium color, there is really no doubt that these colors are opaque. But sometimes they will label something as semi-transparent, and I find it hard to decipher if it is indeed semi-transparent, because it looks a bit like something else on the paper. It looks either more opaque or more transparent, so that's another advantage of doing a chart like this one, because you can see how the colors behave. Also, there is always the notion of when they dry, they might look different than when they are wet. This was Pyro Orange, a semi-transparent color as well. And the very last color for this column, is Permanent Orange. I will take a short break between this column and the rest of the sheet so I can rinse out my water and make sure that I can save up what I've recorded so far in case of a problem. So this color is supposed to be transparent, but when I lay it down wet, it does look a bit more opaque than you would think. Perhaps it does become more transparent as it dries, so that's something that's possible, but I question the logic of these things sometimes, because I wonder if it's something more on the chemical level, or like it will affect more when you mix the colors rather than when you just lay them down single color on a sheet of paper. Alright, so quick break and I will resume this after. And we are back for the second part of this swatching sheet. We are gonna start the third column here, and it starts with Cadmium Orange Hue. I still have cats around, so if you hear noises other than the squeaky chair or me, it's probably a cat. My scout is having a bit of a tougher time today because something is bothering her stomach, probably hairballs. I hope she'll be okay. I mean, she should, but you never know. And you can't really ask them. Which is probably the #1 issue with pets. You can't ask them if they're okay. Okay, next color is Perylene Orange. I was discussing with someone about the name of the colors, and none of these colors really come with a way of saying the name right. So we all do our best, or we all do what we hear the others say. But the thing is that most of us don't really know how these names are supposed to go. For example, you may hear often Pyro for Pyro Red, transparent Pyro Orange, all these colors, but apparently it's supposed to be said Pyro. For me, it's not really surprising because in French, when you read it, it is Pyrrole, so it is pretty close to Pyrrole. But yeah, I mean, this Perylene color, I really have no clue how to say it right, so hopefully I will do an okay job. But if you know on some authority and notice something that I've said the wrong way, feel free to let me know in the comments. This next color is Cadmium Red Scarlet Hue. I should have numbered the number of cadmium colors. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What, about 6 colors? It's kind of interesting. I'm pretty sure there will be maybe more when we get to the darker reds and purples, because I think that Cadmium Red Deep is kind of a purplish deep red color. But yeah, so far we are still just at Cadmium Red Scarlet Hue. And yeah, that's a pretty nice color. The next one is the transparent transparent Pyrrole Orange. It's a color I've seen before and it's really, really beautiful. It is very close to a red in hue. And it makes for really nice mixes with, I think it's phthalo blue. Like, you can get some super dark colors that are really nice, and it is really transparent. Fun color to have on a palette for sure. The next color is Organic Vermilion. Vermilion used to be a very a pigment or a paint with a lot of toxicity attached to it, because I think it used to contain something like mercury. It's a very pretty color. After that we have another Maen color. This one is Maen Orange. I've heard of this color before because I think I have the tube, and it's one of those colors that, interestingly enough, it doesn't have any pigment designation. I don't know how you can end up with a color that doesn't have any pigment designation, but yeah, if you look on the tube of this color, you look for the pigment, it's gonna say something like non-available, or might just say nothing. It is a lovely color. I'm just curious what it's made of. Maybe I should research a bit how Maen colors are made. That could be interesting. The next color is, I do believe, our first quinacridone. This one is Quinacridone Coral. I think it is one of my favorite quinacridone color because it is kind of one of the warmest, perhaps, unless you get into the quinacridone gold or like the more orange quinacridone. But as far as the red quinacridones are concerned, I really like the hue of this one. In general, the quinacridone colors will all be transparent and super duper bright. Alright, next color is Ol Scarlett. If memory serves, Daniel Smith has 4 Pyrrole colors. You have transparent Pyrrole Orange, Ol Scarlett, You have Pyrrole Red, and I think there is perhaps, yeah, there is a Pyrrole Orange that is not transparent over here. If it were just for me, like for every new color, I would say, oh, this is a very pretty color. I don't really have any colors that I dislike. It's often a matter of context, like some colors, say, I wouldn't wear as on a clothing. Like most of these colors I wouldn't wear on clothes, just because it doesn't harmonize well with my personal color scheme. But in terms of painting, I mean, all these colors, they're really pretty. Especially when you get to a brand like Daniel Smith, because they have, I mean, these are all professional range colors, so you are getting good quality for sure. The next color is Perylene Scarlet, and it is supposed to be a granulating color. On their chart, they label the granulating color with a Y for yes, but they still mention that it's to varying degrees, so some colors will perhaps be more lightly granulating, and others will be more strongly granulating. I have no idea about this one. I don't think I knew it was granulating. I don't think this is the best paper to see for granulation. It is fairly smooth, and since it's cellulose paper, I am not inclined to want to use a lot of water on it. Hopefully it will still allow us to see the varying degrees of granulation. This next color is Cadmium Red Medium Hue. There is really no doubt that this color is at least semi-opaque. I would think for myself that the most opaque colors are perhaps really fun to use more in gouache or perhaps acrylic when you want something that is opaque in general, because for watercolor, the opaque colors, they're a bit more difficult to control because they will mix with their opacity into other colors, so it will make more of a muted color, and they don't glow as much as transparent colors. Alright, next color is Pyrrole Red over here. So we had Pyrrole Orange, transparent Pyrrole Orange, Pyrrole Scarlet, and now Pyrrole Red. Next color is Perylene Red. If you're someone who enjoys a good red in their palette, you really have a lot of choice over here. The nuances are really nice also, like some of them will be a bit more warm, some a bit more cool. In that sense, you can really choose the color you want. A lot of the colors on this page in general are semi-transparent, semi-opaque. There are a few really transparent colors. A lot of them are quinacridone. Some of them I'm a bit curious, because if you look at the permanent orange here, it's written as a transparent color, but it definitely leaves some, leaves some pigment on the black area. And if you look at another color who is transparent, like New Gamboge, you cannot see this deposit on the black line. So I am not super clear on what they use to decide if a color is transparent or not, because if a simple test of swatching the color gives a confusing result, I am not sure how they determine the stuff in the lab. Which is a bit why I did not copy over the transparency information on my swatch card, because from experience I know that sometimes they will say something and then you paint with the paint and you get a different feel for the color. And rather than simply going with what they say, I prefer to follow what I see. So if a color to me feels like it's not transparent enough, I'm gonna take my word for it. Well, not my word, but my eyes for it. Next color is Permanent Red Deep. And I keep putting my sleeve in the swatches. Alright, which is probably why it could have been a better idea to go the other way across. Just gotta be more careful. So many reds. So many reds. Okay, our next red is Quinacridone Red. There are quite a lot of Quinacridone general red color. You have coral, red, fuchsia, pink, rose, magenta. You can see how lovely and bright this color is. The next color right after that is Anthraquinone Red. Another very transparent color. Sorry about the chair. Next color is Maen Red, and this one, unlike the Maen Orange and Yellow we've seen before, is supposed to be granulating. I really like the Maen Yellow that Daniel Smith offers over here, because it's not very green, and I've seen some other Maen Yellows that perhaps it was only like a trick of the camera, but they looked like they were greenish. And not having a good yellow in a set is kind of problematic, because you are cut off from mixing certain colors that are very useful, like oranges. Maen Red is somewhat patchy, but I think this is fairly consistent with what I've seen before. And it's a transparent color, so sometimes it's easier to get... it's more difficult to get a very smooth application, because you cannot rely on the pigment's opacity to cover up the brush strokes. Our next color is Alizarin Crimson. Since they offer Alizarin Crimson and Permanent Alizarin Crimson, which is the color just after, this one is probably the genuine pigment. Also, it has a terrible light fastness rating, so it is, chances are it is the real thing. It's one of the colors that I really like, and I know it's not light fast and it will change over time or something, but it's a very beautiful color and I can see why it's still used and was used for a very long time. If you look at the colors that are available in a more traditional and old way, you might see that a lot of them are earth colors, which are nice but often opaque and kind of muted. If you want more bright colors, most of them will come from weird sources, but also plants. And in general, plant colors would fade more than minerals. So that is why indigo and rose madder and gamboge, the real gamboge, were all fugitive colors. Okay, so this is the permanent Alizarin Crimson. It is probably not the same pigment, so in a way it's an Alizarin Crimson hue, but it is supposed to be much more light fast. Light fastness is really useful if you want to sell originals or have paintings exposed on the walls. If you used pigments that are less light fast, you can still get away with it by using UV glass or not having the painting framed in direct sunlight, which is a bad idea regardless. The next color is our very first Primatech color. To quickly explain, Primatech is Daniel Smith's range of paints made with genuine minerals like precious and semi-precious stones. This one, this lovely pink, is supposedly made with rhodonite genuine. The Primatech range is a very nice way of saying what I was saying about the fugitive colors versus the earth colors. Since they are all made with rocks, if you look at the general Primatech range, you will see that they are very, very strong on the brown, grays, muted greens. They have some super nice bright colors, but then again, you can feel that it's not exactly the same. Like, this pink is really nice, but if you look at something like a Quinacridone Pink or Rose, you will see that these chemical quinacridone colors are more vibrant, but I still really like this pink. Alright, so we've finished 2 more columns. I will again take a small break, rinse the water, and save up what I've recorded, and we will catch up, and I will get back to do these 2 last rows. Alright, let's continue with the next color. This one is Carmine. It is one of Denise's favorite red colors, perhaps. Carmine used to be made with from bugs that would be dried and powdered and processed to make a paint. I think nowadays there's only perhaps Lutea who makes a genuine carmine paint. It is of course not vegan, but I think the way it is done in such a small scale, at least at Lutea's, I know they are using the sustainable approach. So not vegan, but sustainable. Okay, next color is Rose Madder Genuine. Rose madder, I think, is perhaps the natural way to have Alizarin Crimson, so the one made from roots, perhaps. I would have to check the pigment numbers to see how they compare, but technically rose madder was made from the roots of the madder plant, which makes sense. Yeah. I know that Holbein's rose madder is one of my favorite colors from them. Then again, they call it rose madder at Holbein's, but perhaps it is just made with the same pigment as the Alizarin Crimson, because it is indeed much easier to re-wet than this one, and the color is very different. As you can see, this one is much lighter. It is supposed to be granulating, and it is probably the one made from the roots of the madder plant. It does look like the swatches I've seen of watercolors made from madder plant roots. Like if you look at Lutea's again, or perhaps Kremer. It is a very nice and light color. Perhaps a bit frustrating to use when dry because it doesn't re-wet super easily. But if you have a tube of this color and you use it fresh from the tube, it's a really nice natural pink color. And speaking of natural looking pink color, the next color is probably the most unnatural pink ever. It is opera pink. Apparently Daniel Smith's opera pink is granulating as well. It is a very fugitive color because it is made from a fluorescent dye with varying amount of pigment added in the mix. Some brands, like Sennelier, I think they use PR122 and the dye, and as a result their opera pink is a lot less neon and perhaps a touch more light fast, because the dye will fade but the pigment will stay. So if you mix the dye with a light fast pigment, there are more chances that something will be left, even if the color fades a bit. It is one of my favorite color, not to use like this unless you have a plan for it, like say you were drawing something really graphic and with a specific color scheme that would make a good use of this neon color, but I like it in mixes. Like for super bright purples and oranges, it's really nice. Not light fast, but like I said. I'm also somewhat of a proponent of rotating the art you have on the walls. If someone has fugitive color and it fades, I will just replace it with a new painting. Okay, next color is Potter's Pink. So we went from a very natural pink to a very non-natural pink, and then we're back again to another natural pink. Whereas this one was supposedly made with roots, the Potter's Pink is made from a mineral, I think. It is a lovely color, and I did a version of this in my handmade paint range because I really like this Potter's Pink color, but it is very difficult to re-wet in most brands I've seen, and this one doesn't seem to be an exception. So I wanted to see for myself if I could mix a version of Potter's Pink that would be easier to re-wet, and I did. And it turned out quite well. I'm really happy with the way the color turned out. I made it as a first test batch to see if it would do well, and I'm sold out on them, but I will see about getting some more of the Potter's Pink pigment and reproducing the recipe as close as I can to have a nice, easy to re-wet Potter's Pink. Also, I think the pigment I had was a touch brighter than this one, which is fairly muted. It is supposed to be a granulating color. Alright. Next color we have on this is Quinacridone Pink. So we have Quinacridone Pink and Quinacridone Rose. why have the two, you might think? One of them is made with the PV19 pigment, while the other is made with PV42 pigment. They, as far as I can remember from my swatches, they look almost identical. I think the interest of having the PV42 version is that it is the only hue of this pigment. Like, if you've noticed how often PV19 is present as a color, it has a lot of different hues. Like, you can have it a more purple way, you can have it a more pink way, you can have it a more red way, and it is always going to be PV19. So perhaps it's trickier to get the consistent color if you use PV19. While if you look at the PV42 colors, it's always the same because it's the only hue of this pigment. So perhaps that's the reasoning behind the color. Aside from that, they are so similar that I am not really sure. I hope I will be able to do a good representation here of how similar they are, but due to the sizes and the readability of my dots, it might be a bit difficult to see. I will try to add a bit more intensity to the pink swatch. It is a much smaller dot, so I hope I won't end up scrubbing the paper too much. Okay, yeah, that's a bit more bright. So you can perhaps see what I mean, that these colors are very, very similar. Like, perhaps when they are next to each other like that, you can find a difference, but if you use... I wouldn't say use for both of these on a palette. Like, you can do with either one of them, and they are both series 2, so what else could be different? They have a slight difference in staining. They're both transparent, they are both non-granulating. One has an excellent light fastness, but the other has a very good one, except that it is not rated. Technical stuff. And after that we have Quinacridone Magenta. If I remember correctly, it's a bit more on the purple side. Yep. You can't be disappointed with Quinacridone colors in general. They will always have excellent brightness and intensity. These are great colors. Okay, after that... Oh, perhaps our fifth Pyro color that I didn't spot earlier, but this one is Pyro Crimson. Let's get to it. It's a very small dot, so I'll try to make the best I can. Come on, come on, come on. If I scrub too hard at the paper from the dot chart, sorry, I end up peeling the paper, and it makes for like these little lumps in my swatches, which is not great. Because, I mean, the lumps are one thing, but you also have to take in consideration the cat hair. And yeah, okay, so yeah, pretty color. Well, they're all pretty colors. Okay, next one is Quinacridone Fuchsia. So, Pico, do you like Quinacridone Fuchsia? Do you like it? You do? Pico has voiced her opinion on the Quinacridone Fuchsia. Next one is Maen Violet, which is another one of the Maen colors, and it's supposed to be a transparent and granulating one. Hopefully I am not in frame. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of a tad more difficult to re-wet, but you give it a second and it's really nice color. I think that swatching these has really made me curious about these Maen colors, and I'm gonna have to check out what makes them like Maen colors. It's probably the way the pigment is made. I read something about something precipitated, something like the color precipitated onto clay, and then they make the paint with the clay perhaps, but I'm really not sure. Don't quote me on this, please. Alright, and the very last column. First color is Bordeaux, which is a type of wine, if I'm not mistaken. I don't really drink wine, so. Or Bordeaux. Bordeaux is the French version of the pronunciation. It is a very, very intense color as well. It is so deep, wow. I think it's the first time I'm swatching this one, and gotta say, it's really nice. The next color is Quinacridone Violet. We have Permanent Violet after that. It used to be made with the single pigment PR88, I think. But since they've since changed the formula, so I have no way of knowing which formula is on my sheet, and I keep spraying color everywhere the way I rub this with the dots, I'm sorry. But yeah, this Permanent Violet used to be a single color. A single pigment, sorry, but I am not sure this is the case for this dot. It used to be part of a Holbein color as well. That was a white pigment and this violet pigment mixed together. It's a Theo Indigo Violet, but that color has also been discontinued, so I wonder if there is simply kind of a lack of sourcing for the Theo Indigo Violet pigment. Right. Then we have Perylene Violet. There are quite a few Perylene colors. We've seen Perylene Red, we've seen Perylene Scarlet, we have Perylene Violet, there's a Perylene Green as well, and Perylene Maroon. Maybe some of those are the same, depending on the brand. But it is one of those super nice, super deep colors. A limited palette truly benefits from having very intense colors, in my opinion, because you can always go lighter. Like, you just add water and there you have a lighter version of the color, so easy peasy. But if you start with super light colors, you might not be able to get them darker. So if you have a large palette and you have a few lighter colors in there, that's okay, because they're probably there for specific reasons and specific uses in mind. But if you have a very limited palette, then perhaps you are better to count on more intense colors so that you are given more choices. This color is Cobalt Violet. In general, cobalt colors are somewhat harder to re-wet, and this one is no exception. It is transparent and granulating, and it's probably going to be fairly light. Yep. So, just as I was talking about having intense colors being more useful on a limited palette, here we have an excellent example of a super intense color in the Perylene Violet and a super light one in the Cobalt Violet. If you really like these more muted colors, like I quite like Cobalt Violet, and if I wanted to paint with it, with Daniel Smith's version, I would consider getting a tube and using it straight from the tube when I need it, not putting it into a pan, because it is very frustrating to re-wet and you might get better results if you have fresh paint rather than dry paint. The next color is again Cobalt Violet, but this one is the deep version. It's also granulating and also transparent and also hard to re-wet. But it's a very different hue, as you can see, where this one is a warm red purple, the deep version is a cool bluish purple. Usually cobalt colors are pricier. I think there is something in the handling and the acquiring of the pigment that makes it more expensive than other colors. The next color is Ultramarine Red. So we're gonna have an interesting 4 last colors in this column. So we have Ultramarine Red, we have Rose of Ultramarine, Imperial Purple, and Ultramarine Violet. Ultramarine Red and Ultramarine Violet are in the ultramarine family of colors, in a sense that I can't say on the chemical and scientific level, but on the visual level, they are somewhat difficult to re-wet, just like ultramarine blue is. They are granulating, like ultramarine blue, and they really present similar characteristics in texture and application than you would find in ultramarine blue. So I can see why they fit together, at least. But yeah, they are kind of weak colors as well and somewhat difficult to re-wet. So again, perhaps one of these colors that either you get the tubes and you use it from the tube, or you look at other brands that use honey in their paints, like Sennelier and M. Graham, because these paints are usually easier to re-wet. So if they have a variant of these colors that you like, you may get it from them and experience the colors a lot easier without ruining your brush. Rose of Ultramarine is a proprietary color at Daniel Smith, I would say. They basically mix together, I think it's ultramarine blue and one of the PV19 pigments. So you have this purple color that granulates really nicely as it settles, but it's not as difficult to reactivate as other purples, so in that regards it's really interesting for that. It's also a series 1, I think, so it's quite affordable if you like this kind of effect and you want to use it often rather than mixing it every single time. You can buy this convenience color pre-made from Daniel Smith. So, Pico enjoys Rose of Ultramarine as well. You like it? Yep. I do hope that the mic is gonna pick up the kitten sounds, because otherwise I'm just gonna sound like I'm talking to myself. Yeah. Alright, so the next one is Imperial Purple. It is a very similar idea to Rose of Ultramarine, but with a different... I can't remember if it's a different mix of pigments or a different ratio, but basically they put together two colors with slightly different characteristics, and it makes for a very nice color with a beautiful effect when it separates and granulates a bit. I will try to add a bit of water, but not cause it to cauliflower too much. And the very last color is a bit like what I was saying about the Ultramarine Red. It is Ultramarine Violet. There is also Ultramarine Pink, but it would seem that Daniel Smith doesn't have it, perhaps? Anyway. I keep on splooshing spring colors with the way I try to work these dots. So it's kind of a weak color, granulating as well, but more purple than the Ultramarine Red. Or perhaps that's what they call their Ultramarine Pink. Come on. Come on, brain. Alright. Hopefully I'm not too... Oh yeah, that was in camera. Nice, nice, nice. That's the full first sheet completely swatched. Perhaps in frame as well. And here we have the whole dots. I will let this dry, and then I will remove the blue tape, so we can get a good view of these colors together and see what's going on in there and what's interesting. Alright, so again. So let's see if this is mostly dry. I think I can safely remove the tape. There's quite a lot of strips of tape on here. So maybe not the most tape savvy project that I could have come up with, but it's nice to have the borders protected so that I cannot possibly have one color spreading into another color. This is super thin tape, like thin painter's tape. I got it off Amazon, I think. Whee! Tape. It's quite satisfying to remove tape. So basically I wrote on cellulose watercolor paper with a ballpoint pen that I know is waterproof, and then I taped off borders, and then I used some tape again, but I didn't leave on there, but I placed a strip of tape to protect the swatching area so I could make the black lines more easily using a Sharpie. And I think that in general the best way to use a Sharpie for swatching is to really give it the time to draw. If it's not completely dry, perhaps the alcohol in the Sharpie does react with the paint a bit, and it creates a weird halo around the black lines. Might have been prettier if I had not put in the black ballpoint pen lines, just a tape to protect, but I think that's still gonna be very usable. It's kind of a lot of work to set up too, so I'm not really I'm really hoping I don't have to repeat this process on something that I've already done. So far, I'm liking how this looks. I should do this for all the sheets in the Daniel Smith set, but also if this turns out to be useful, I might be on the lookout for like the chart from Schminke, and I have a couple of surprises in store for that concept as well. Not all the brands make a dot chart of their whole range. For most of them, they don't even offer a set of the whole range. I've only seen Holbein do it and Sennelier, but it also happens that these two brands are not the largest. Sennelier has about 100 colors in its range and Holbein has about 108. So perhaps it's easier to fit in a smaller number of colors. If you think that Daniel Smith has 240 colors at least, then you're in for a much bigger price point for the whole set. So kind of a sad thing to get rid of all this tape, but it cannot really be reused as it has paint on it, and the paint would transfer to other paper or other colors if I were to reuse this. So there you have it. I turned it aside so it would fit in the camera, but this is basically the whole first sheet of this dot card. Whether or not you think this is a useful exercise is entirely up to you. For myself, I quite enjoy seeing the colors as a swatch, not necessarily with the dot next to them, because the dot can sort of influence the way you perceive the color, because it's a bit more intense and a bit more strong or opaque. Having these swatches is kind of a very interesting way to look at these, and you can more easily see which colors have some granulation to them and which have special effects. So I've zoomed in a bit. I will try to cycle through the colors, not too fast, but in a way that perhaps you will see better close up what they are like. Do I have favorite colors on this sheet? Perhaps. It would be maybe difficult to say, because I think each color can have a use at some point, like even colors like this Potter's Pink. It's not something you would use for a super bright colorful illustration, of course, but what happens like if you mix a bit of Potter's Pink into this opera pink? Do you get kind of a muted, super granulating pink? Or what happens if you mix this one again with the permanent violet here, which is fairly smooth? What kind of effect can you get? So even if a color is not to your liking in itself, I personally like to look at the characteristics and how I can perhaps incorporate them into something else. Like same for the cobalt colors. They're not very strong on their own, but what happens if I mix this cobalt violet with the quinacridone pink? Do I get like a granulating kind of pink that has like purpler areas and pinker areas? What happens if I mix this cobalt and the same pink? Do I get something more interesting, less interesting? There's a lot to be done with these colors, and it's very rare that a color will be used straight from the tube as it is and do everything it needs to do. Like often it's from mixing colors or putting them one next to another that you get something really special going on. Okay, so basically that's my 2 cents on on colors in general and this sheet in particular. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to cover the other sheets of the dot cards from Daniel Smith in this fashion. I will probably do them for myself anyway, but if you enjoy seeing this process and would like me to share the other pages, please let me know and I will make it happen. Thank you very much for watching this very lengthy video and see you next time. Bye bye!